What happens when a silent monk in prayer robes gets cornered by the most dangerous gang in a maximum security prison? And instead of backing down, he smiles. You're about to witness a story so unexpected, it'll challenge everything you think you know about strength, redemption, and true power. Welcome back to Tales of Wonder. If you enjoy stories that remind us that wisdom often comes from the most unlikely places, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a tale that might change how you see the world. Now let's begin today's story. The first time Marcus Ghost Williams walked through the gates of Ironwood Penitentiary as a free man visiting a monk, the guards didn't recognize him. And why would they? The last time he'd been here, 15 years ago, he was prisoner 847-2293, a street legend who'd built an empire on fear, violence, and a reputation that made hardened criminals look away when he walked past. Now, at 43, Marcus wore simple gray robes, prayer beads wrapped around his wrist, and moved with a stillness that made people uncomfortable. Not the predatory stillness of his former life. No, this was different. This was the quiet of someone who'd fought the most brutal battle of all, the war within himself. The irony wasn't lost on him. Marcus had spent 8 years in this very prison, ruling cell block D with an iron fist, before a near-fatal stabbing in the yard forced him to confront his own mortality. During his recovery in the prison hospital, a visiting Buddhist monk named Tik Fook had sat with him daily, never preaching, never judging, just present. That presence had cracked something in Marcus that violence never could. After his release, Marcus had spent 7 years in a monastery in Northern California, training under Master Tik Fook. He learned that true strength wasn't about dominating others. It was about mastering yourself. And now, his teacher had given him the most difficult assignment of his life: return to Ironwood as a volunteer spiritual counselor. You will teach what you have learned, Master Tik Fook had said, his ancient eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. But remember, Marcus, the greatest lessons are taught not through words, but through being. As Marcus walked through the familiar corridors now, the smell of industrial disinfectant and desperation hit him like a physical force. Nothing had changed. The same gray walls, the same clanging of metal doors, the same undercurrent of violence waiting to explode. What he didn't know was that Cell Block D, his former kingdom, had a new ruler. And that ruler had heard stories about Ghost Williams. Dante Havoc Rodriguez was 28, built like a professional fighter, and had spent the last 3 years establishing himself as the most feared inmate in Ironwood. He'd heard the legends about Ghost Williams, the man who'd supposedly controlled the entire prison with just a look, who'd orchestrated protection rackets, drug trades, and maintained order through calculated brutality. When word spread that Ghost Williams was returning to the prison as some monk, Havoc had laughed so hard he'd nearly choked on his commissary coffee. A monk, he'd said to his inner circle, a group of 5 inmates who acted as his enforcers. Ghost Williams became a monk? That's the funniest thing I've heard all year. The man's gone soft. When he shows his face in here, I'm going to show everyone what happens to legends who forget who they were. The opportunity came during Marcus's 3rd week at the prison. He'd been holding meditation sessions in the chapel, quiet, voluntary gatherings that attracted a surprising number of inmates seeking something, anything beyond the daily grind of survival and violence. About 15 men showed up regularly, sitting in awkward silence at first, then gradually, tentatively, finding moments of peace. Havoc decided to make an example during one of these sessions. He walked into the chapel with his crew, their boots echoing deliberately on the floor. The 15 inmates sitting in meditation immediately tensed. Everyone knew what Havoc's presence meant. Marcus, sitting at the front of the room, eyes closed, didn't move. Well, Havoc announced, his voice dripping with theatrical menace. Look at this. The legendary Ghost Williams, playing dress-up. You know, old man, my guys and I were just discussing how this chapel would make an excellent card room. Private, quiet, perfect for our needs. The inmates shifted uncomfortably. Marcus continued his meditation, breath steady. Havoc's jaw tightened. Being ignored was worse than being challenged. Hey, I'm talking to you, monk. He spat the last word like an insult. You think those robes protect you? You think because you found religion, you're untouchable? I'm giving you one chance to get your little prayer circle out of here before. Marcus opened his eyes. The movement was so simple, so undramatic, that it almost seemed anticlimactic. But something in his gaze, calm, clear, utterly unfazed, made Havoc pause for just a fraction of a second. You're welcome to join us, Marcus said softly. We're just sitting, breathing. It's free, and it's open to everyone. One of Havoc's crew, a guy named Bones, snorted. Boss, let me handle this disrespectful. I got it, Havoc snapped. He stepped closer to Marcus, close enough that the violation of personal space was unmistakable. You don't seem to understand the situation, Ghost. This isn't your prison anymore. I run things now, and what I say is, your little meditation club is finished. As of right now. Marcus looked up at him with something that could only be described as compassion. I understand you feel you need to establish dominance, that you believe power comes from making others fear you. I used to believe that too. Used to. Havoc's voice rose. Old man, you think you're better than me now? You think you've transcended or some spiritual garbage? Let me tell you something. What happened next occurred so quickly that the security cameras barely caught it. Havoc grabbed Marcus by his robes and yanked him to his feet, drawing his fist back for a punch that would establish his supremacy once and for all. But Marcus didn't resist, didn't fight back. He shifted his weight in a way that was so subtle, so economical, that Havoc found himself stumbling forward off balance. In that half-second of confusion, Marcus's hand moved to Havoc's elbow, not striking, just touching, and suddenly Havoc's entire right side went numb. His fist, cocked and ready to destroy, dropped uselessly to his side. What the Havoc tried to pull away, but his legs weren't responding correctly. He staggered, caught himself on a chair, his face flushing with humiliation as his crew watched in confusion. Marcus had already returned to his seated position, hands folded in his lap, expression serene. Pressure points, Marcus said quietly, as if lecturing a class. The human body has 361 recognized acupuncture points. 36 of them can temporarily disrupt motor function without causing lasting damage. Your nervous system is just confused right now. Full sensation will return in about 90 seconds. The chapel had gone absolutely silent. Havoc's crew moved to help him, but he waved them off angrily, even as he struggled to regain his balance. The numbness was already fading, pins and needles flooding back into his limbs, but the damage to his reputation was done. Everyone in that chapel had just watched him get neutralized by a monk who hadn't even stood up. Havoc's voice shook with rage and something else, something that might have been fear. You just assaulted me. Guards are gonna, what assault? Marcus's voice remained gentle. You grabbed me, you lost your balance, you stumbled. I touched your arm to steady you. Isn't that what happened? He looked around the room. Did anyone see me strike this man? The 15 inmates in meditation sat in stunned silence. Technically, legally, Marcus was right. There had been no punch, no kick, no obvious attack. Just a touch. One of the regular attendees, an older inmate named Jerome, who'd been coming to meditation to deal with chronic pain, spoke up. I saw Havoc grab the monk, then trip. That's all. The others nodded in agreement. Not because they feared Marcus, his entire demeanor radiated nonviolence, but because they recognized something else, justice. They were tired of Havoc's bullying, tired of living in fear, and watching him get outmaneuvered by a peaceful monk was the most satisfying thing they'd seen in years. Havoc, now fully recovered physically if not emotionally, pointed a shaking finger at Marcus. This isn't over. You think you're smart? You think you're special? Tomorrow, yard time, you and me. We'll see how zen you are when I break every bone in your body. Marcus met his eyes with that same unshakable calm. If you need to fight me to feel whole, I'll meet you. But I won't fight back. I've spent too many years learning that violence only creates more violence. So, if you need to hit me, go ahead. But I'm telling you now, it won't give you what you're looking for. We'll see about that, Havoc snarled, then stormed out of the chapel, his crew trailing behind him, confusion evident on their faces. After they left, One of the meditators, a young guy named Cisco, whispered, "Brother Marcus, you just poked a hornet's nest. Havoc's going to bring his whole crew tomorrow. He won't come alone." Marcus smiled, a real, warm smile that somehow made him look younger. "Then I guess we'd better make sure we show up prepared too." "Prepared how?" Jerome asked. "You just said you won't fight back." "I won't," Marcus confirmed. "But that doesn't mean I'm unprepared." That night, word spread through the prison like wildfire. Ghost Williams, the legendary enforcer who'd supposedly gone soft, had just humiliated Havoc without throwing a single punch. Bets were placed. Theories were formed. And tension built toward what everyone knew would be a defining moment. What nobody knew, not even Havoc, was that Marcus had made several phone calls that evening. Not to lawyers or guards, but to three men who'd been his old crew 15 years ago, who were still serving time in Ironwood, and who'd been quietly attending his meditation sessions under aliases. Big T, Carlos, and Wyatt. All three had followed Marcus's transformation from a distance over the years through the prison grapevine. All three had been attending meditation skeptically, curious about what had changed their old boss so dramatically. The next day, the prison yard was more crowded than usual. Word had spread, and inmates found reasons to be outside during the specified time. Guards, sensing something brewing, had increased their presence but couldn't justify locking down the yard without a concrete cause. Marcus walked out at exactly 2 p.m., still in his gray robes, still radiating that unsettling peace. He moved to the center of the yard, near the weight pile, and sat down cross-legged on the concrete. Havoc emerged with his crew of 5, plus about a dozen other inmates he'd pressured into joining him. 20 men in total, all focused on one peaceful monk. But then something unexpected happened. Big T walked over and sat down next to Marcus. Then Carlos. Then Wyatt. Then Jerome, Cisco, and the other regulars from meditation. Within 2 minutes, about 30 inmates had formed a circle around Marcus, all sitting in a meditative posture, all silent. Havoc stopped dead, confusion breaking through his anger. What the hell is this? Big T, who was 6'5" and 300 pounds of pure muscle, opened his eyes and looked at Havoc calmly. "This is us choosing a different path, young blood. You want to get to Brother Marcus, you're going to have to go through all of us. But here's the thing, none of us are going to fight you. You want to throw punches at people who won't fight back? Go ahead. But ask yourself how that's going to look." One of Havoc's crew members, Bones, looked at his boss uncertainly. "Man, I ain't about to start beating up dudes who ain't even standing." That's what?" Havoc demanded. "That's weak," another voice called out. It was an older inmate named Rafe, watching from the sidelines. "Real strength is what they're doing. Sitting there, unafraid, not needing to prove nothing. That takes more guts than throwing punches." Havoc looked around, and for the first time in years, he saw something he didn't know how to fight: solidarity through peace. These weren't frightened inmates cowering before power. These were men who'd chosen to be different, and that choice made them untouchable in a way violence never could. "You're all crazy," Havoc said, but his voice had lost its edge. Marcus finally spoke, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. "Dante, I'm going to tell you something I wish someone had told me when I was your age, ruling this place like you do now. I thought power was making people afraid of me. I thought respect was the same as fear. And I was so wrong." He stood slowly, brushing off his robes. The circle of men remained seated, protective but non-threatening. "Real power," Marcus continued, walking closer to Havoc, "is having the strength to hurt someone and choosing not to. Real respect is earned through character, not intimidation. And real courage is admitting when you're scared, when you're lost, when you don't have all the answers." Havoc's jaw worked, emotions warring across his face. "I know why you run this place like you do," Marcus said softly, now just a few feet away. "Because if you're the most feared, nobody can hurt you first. Because control feels like safety. Because you've been powerless before, and you've promised yourself never again." Am I close? Something flickered in Havoc's eyes, a crack in the armor. "But here's what I learned the hard way," Marcus continued. "That kind of power is exhausting. It's a prison inside a prison. You can't rest, can't trust, can't ever let your guard down. And eventually, someone younger and hungrier and more violent comes along, and the cycle continues. Unless someone chooses to step off that wheel. Why would I trust you? Havoc's voice was barely above a whisper now. You don't have to trust me, Marcus said. But you could trust yourself. The part of you that's tired. The part that wonders if there's more to life than this. The part that's curious about why 30 men just sat down to protect someone who wouldn't even protect himself. The yard had gone completely silent. Even the guards were watching, hands resting on their equipment, but not intervening. Havoc looked at his crew, then at the circle of seated meditators, then back at Marcus. This is stupid. You're all stupid. But he didn't move, didn't attack, just stood there, a young man wearing the costume of a king, suddenly aware of how heavy the crown was. Join us, Marcus said. Not now, not today, but when you're ready. The chapel, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Just breathing, just being. No judgment, no expectations. Just a chance to remember who you are underneath all the armor. Then Marcus did something that nobody expected. He bowed deeply and respectfully to Havoc. Thank you for not hurting me today, he said. That took real strength. And then he walked away, the circle of meditators standing and following him back toward the building. Havoc stood alone in the center of the yard, his crew uncertain behind him, watching the monk in gray robes disappear inside. 3 weeks later, a new face appeared in the chapel during meditation. He sat in the back, arms crossed, expression skeptical but present. Marcus didn't acknowledge him, didn't make a big deal of it. He rang the bell to begin the session. Dante Havoc Rodriguez lasted exactly 8 minutes before the emotion hit him. Years of anger, fear, and exhaustion he'd been holding at bay with violence. When he started crying, silently, shoulders shaking, nobody mocked him. Jerome handed him a tissue. Big T nodded with understanding. And Marcus just kept breathing, modeling the very thing Havoc had been taught was weakness, vulnerability. Over the following months, something unprecedented happened in Cell Block D. Violence didn't disappear. This was still prison, but it decreased. Havoc began mediating disputes instead of escalating them. His former crew members started showing up to meditation. And the legend of Ghost Williams took on a new meaning. Not the ghost of a violent past, but the ghost of who they could become if they chose differently. The warden, watching this transformation through reports and security footage, called Marcus into his office one day. I don't understand what you're doing, the warden admitted. But it's working. Incidents in D Block are down 40%. We're seeing inmates requesting education programs, conflict resolution training. Whatever magic you're selling, keep selling it. Marcus smiled. It's not magic. It's just the truth that every person in here, every person everywhere, is suffering and looking for a way out. Some of us find it through violence, some through drugs, some through religion or philosophy or art. But we're all just looking for the same thing, peace. Well, your peace is cheaper than overtime for guards, the warden said dryly. So, from a budgetary standpoint, I'm a fan. As Marcus left the office, he passed Havoc in the hallway. The younger man nodded, a gesture of respect that cost him nothing and meant everything. Hey, Marcus, Havoc called out. Question for you. Marcus turned. That pressure point thing you did. Could you teach me that? Marcus's eyes twinkled with the same amusement Master Tick Fook used to show. Wrong question, Dante. The technique is useless if you don't first learn when not to use it. Come to meditation for 6 months straight. Then we'll talk. 6 months? Man, that's patience, Marcus interrupted gently. Is the first lesson, and often the hardest. Havoc shook his head, but he was smiling. You're a weird dude, Ghost, says the prison gang leader who cries in chapel. Marcus countered with a grin. They laughed together. 2 men from completely different eras of the same prison, finding common ground in the most unlikely place. Not in dominance, but in surrender. The real twist came 6 years later, after both Marcus and Dante had completed their time at Ironwood. Marcus as a volunteer, Dante as an inmate who'd earned early release for good behavior. They opened a community center together in East Oakland called the Middle Way, offering martial arts training, meditation, conflict resolution, and job placement for ex-convicts. During the grand opening, a reporter asked Dante how he'd gone from being the most feared man in prison to a community leader. Dante smiled and said, "I met someone who taught me that strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how much you can endure without hitting back. And that lesson? That saved my life." The reporter then asked Marcus what his greatest achievement was. Marcus thought for a long moment, then said, "Getting Dante to ask me to teach him that pressure point technique and watching him realize after 6 months of meditation that he didn't need it anymore. That's when I knew he'd found real power." But here's what nobody knew, what Marcus never told anyone. That day in the chapel when Havoc grabbed him, when Marcus touched that pressure point with such precision and calm, his hand had been shaking. His heart had been racing. And for just a moment, the old ghost Williams had risen inside him, ready to fight, ready to dominate, ready to prove he was still the king. Choosing peace in that moment, when violence would have been so easy, so instinctive, so satisfying, that had been the hardest thing Marcus had ever done. True humility, it turned out, wasn't about being meek or passive. It was about having the power to destroy someone and choosing every single time to build them up instead. And that was a lesson worth teaching in any prison, including the ones we build inside ourselves. So, here's my question for you. Have you ever encountered someone who changed the entire energy of a difficult situation, not through force, but through presence? What happened? And what did it teach you about real strength? If this story moved you, challenged you, or reminded you that transformation is always possible, hit that like button and drop a comment below. I love hearing your thoughts and experiences. And if you're new here, subscribe to Tales of Wonder for more stories that dig deep into what it means to be human, to struggle, to grow, and sometimes to find peace in the most unexpected places. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Remember, the greatest victories aren't won in combat. They're won in the quiet moments when we choose who we want to be. See you in the next video.